Welcome to the Storyaday podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to write every day, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from Storyaday, and as I talk to you this week, we are partway through the second week of Storyaday September and heading into week 3 of Storyaday September. There's a shift that tends to happen at this time of a challenge, this point of a challenge like this. In week 1, you've used your obvious ideas, the things that you'd been storing up. In week 2, you're having to reach a little bit deeper, and it seems to get harder topic-wise, and it seems to get harder to summon the energy. So if you're here listening to this on the day that this releases, you'll be listening on day 11 of the challenge. If you can keep going through the end of this week, turn up every day, you will start to find that you're getting into a groove. And a strange thing happens in that groove. And it is that you start to see the writing as the thing itself. You stop worrying so much about whether it's good, and you worry about whether it's done, because you are invested in this process now. And with that relaxation into just getting the writing done every day comes a very strange moment when you start digging deeper and you start reaching for the weirder ideas and you stop prejudging the stuff that you're writing. I'm not guaranteeing this is going to happen every day as you move into week 3, but in general, there is a tendency to let the stories be whatever they want. I've just finished reading a really weird and wonderful book called The Animals in That Country, and it's a book in which, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, there's a disease that allows people to understand animals. So to read that book, you have to relax into the flow of the writer's non-traditional narrative structure, because she's representing the way that different groups of animals talk, and they don't talk like us. And it's weird and, as I say, kind of wonderful. That's sort of what happens in the third week of a challenge like this. If you just focus on getting the words done, your will at this point relax and be able to just accept that whatever comes out of your pen, whatever comes out of your fingers, whatever comes out of your brain is enough. And you will start to come up with ideas that you don't know where they came from. You might try forms and expressions that are nothing like you've written before. And it's really, really interesting. This challenge isn't for everyone. And if you haven't been taking part in this edition of Storyaday, don't worry, you can try it another time. This might not be the right time for you. This might never be the right kind of challenge for you. I'm hoping that some of the prompts and some of these chit-chats inspire you to get to your writing desk, but this isn't for everyone. In fact, one of the people I approached for a prompt this year very politely wrote back and said, "This is not the way I work, and I just don't feel comfortable endorsing it as a working, as an aim as a writer." And I completely understand what this writer meant. You look at these challenges and it's this hell for leather writing approach, and it doesn't really encourage people to work on the quality and the craft of their writing. And that's not where this writer is in their process now. And for them, this would be a harmful thing to do, and they can no longer see the benefit of it, maybe because they've been writing so long and they're so accomplished that they don't remember quite so well what it's like to be earlier in the journey. I think this challenge is particularly useful if you aren't writing regularly and you need to get that comfort level with letting the writing be what the writing is. And this journey from week 2 to week 3 of the Storyaday challenge is where that can really happen. Having said that, I just want to have a little side note to say this challenge is not just for people who are starting out and needing to create a writing habit, as is evidenced by the fact that there are people doing this challenge for the 12th time. Actually, more than that, because I run it twice a year. There are people doing this challenge in its 12th year who come back to it year after year for that month of intensity away from their other projects or as a seasoning to their other projects, and they find their own value in it. So it is a challenge that can work for you. You don't have to be taking part. Not taking part in this doesn't mean that you're a failure as a writer or that I somehow think that you're not one of us. You are. But if you are struggling with the fact that week 2 is quite difficult and you can't face the thought that there are 2 more weeks and a couple of days to go, trust that turning up every day is going to just for this 1 month, right? Not forever. I do not advocate trying to do this forever. I know some people who've tried to do this for a year. They've written a story a day for a year. And I think I would go mad if I tried that. If you can hang on and keep showing up day after day for a month, you're going to learn some really interesting things about your writing, about what you love, about what you're capable of, about what your limits are, about what you need, about what you don't need. And I think it's going to help you in the future to know that you've done this and that you made a commitment and you stuck to it and you wrote some stories and you wrote some rubbish and you survived. It sounds like a small thing. It sounds like an unimportant thing, but proving to yourself that you can do more than you thought you could is incredibly powerful. But I also really want you to know and hear me when I say that if you keep turning up, you're going to be reaching past your first ideas, past the easy stuff, into the really interesting bits. You're going to go deeper into your ideas and your experiences, and you're going to start making connections that you never knew were there. You're going to discover things you cared about that you didn't realize you cared about. And if you're getting stuck, I highly recommend that you grab a collection off your shelf or you go browsing online and find some weird and wonderful stories to read to inspire you as you go through the month. If you're listening to this, you're probably a podcast fan, so go and subscribe to LeVar Burton Reads, subscribe to Selected Shorts, subscribe to Escape Pod or one of their... They've got multiple podcasts, and then you can double up on your time. It's not like you have to set aside extra time for reading short stories. You can be listening to a short story while you are doing other things, while you're getting your exercise or, folding your laundry or whatever other tasks you have that are making you think you couldn't possibly have time to read more or write more. Find ways like podcasts to top up your imagination tank at the same time as you are fulfilling all of the obligations that you have in life. Make them a little bit more enjoyable too. Just a suggestion, I've been doing a lot of that kind of thing this week, making sure I reach for a book when I am tempted to reach for social media, That's another advantage of a month like this, where you're focused on a big writing challenge, is that you see how to fit more of the stuff that really matters to you into your life. It can be much more relaxing and rewarding to dip into a story than to dip into the news feed. But the news feed is more sort of, it's more like pulling that arm on the one-armed bandit or hitting the button on the machine in Vegas. You get that kind of like ding, 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 ding. Where's it going to land? Whereas with a story, it's less of a dopamine hit, but it's a much more rewarding experience. You've probably heard me talk about this before, where social media it triggers the same kind of things in us that gambling does, where it's the variable response, and psychologists have done experiments which show that the refreshing your social media feed triggers the same parts of the brain as gambling, because we don't know what the result is going to be. So it's exciting. So we tend to reach for that when we look for distraction. I'm making a case just to remind you that you're a reader, that you love story, and that if you can reach for a book in those, little 5 and 10 minute intervals that you have free in the day, that will be much more rewarding. Not to sound preachy, but, just reminding you that there are alternatives. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with those thoughts that if you keep going this week, it's going to get weird, it's going to get wonderful. And I hope that even if you've missed a few days of this challenge, I have, that you come back to it and you stay focused on turning up for your writing and just jump back in on a day that the prompts speak to you, or look back at the prompts that you've missed and just set aside that time and get a story written. And for those of you who've been writing every day, congratulations. Even if they're tiny, even if they're messy, you're doing it, and I'm incredibly proud of you. After the break, I will come back with some thoughts on one of the prompts from last week, the prompt from Roxane Gay. If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the Storyaday 3-day challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days, and it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-day challenge at storyaday.org/3DC. This prompt comes from Roxane Gay, and she writes, write a story that doesn't use unhappiness as its narrative catalyst. That is to say, write a happy story, one that is textured, interesting, not overly sentimental, but that is at its core a happy story, however you choose to imagine that. I particularly like this one because a lot of times when people are writing short stories or novels, they'll say to me, all my stories are coming out sad. Some of it, I think, is just that when we mine our memories and we look for emotional moments and turning points tend to be triggered by reaching the bottom of the barrel. We don't change unless we can't stand being the way that we are anymore. And that can be wonderful. We can have wonderful changes and revelations through pain and suffering. So I think a lot of the times when we're writing and we're looking for those emotional turning points for characters that we can use or conflict that we can use, we go towards the dark and we go towards that bottom of the barrel moment. What Roxane Gay is inviting you to do is not to use that as the trigger for the story without becoming sentimental. A happy ending doesn't have to be they all lived happily ever after. A happy story can be a character acting in integrity with who they want to be when they've been repressing who they really are all their lives. A happy ending can be the right ending. It can be a just outcome. So what you're being asked to do today is not to take something traumatic as the trigger for your story, not to leave us feeling a little sad at the end, but to write a story that uses maybe just an everyday event and has an aha at some point in it. I'm always saying that writing and writers change the world. It doesn't have to be big and dramatic. You can think of examples of people in your life who've influenced you in a moment by saying a word, by saying a sentence, by acting in a certain way. And it wasn't like the sky opened and the angels sang and everything was all right from there on in and you lived happily ever after. But maybe you saw your grandmother act in a certain way towards a certain kind of person who everybody else was mean to. And that just went in and sat there in your head. Maybe that's the kind of story you write today. Maybe it's about kindness or joy. Maybe a baby is born who's been longed for. Maybe a marriage happens. Maybe somebody finds $20 and something funny happens. I think this is a really good exercise to keep us from getting too serious about ourselves. Fiction entertains. It teaches, sure. It can be about big, important things, sure, but it can be entertaining and it can lift people up. And you're allowed to do that, and it's still important. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and, of course, keep writing.